what I've assembled this Zoom meeting together today is to try and discuss the possibility of something innovative. It's not remarkably innovative, but it's a bit of a step for most churches to go to have live radio broadcasts on a Sabbath or any day during the week and interrupt the main flow of their primary service. So for most churches operating in the southwest of WA and many other parts of Australia, including my own home, by the way, Faith FM is the source from which we derive our audio programming. And it is completely 24/7 dominant. And that's fine. And that's very efficient and effective for the most part. The alternative is 3ABN Radio Australia via satellite. And that is also very effective. And it has its advantages and its disadvantages. The different platforms lend themselves to different kinds of standardization in content and product and planning and programming. I like Faith FM because it officially is Australian grown content. Not all of it, but a lot of it. I like 3ABN because they were here first in the radio scene.
Okay.
And they've been quite good at not financially backing, but it was just a very accessible platform via satellite. Many churches already had satellite dishes, and so they could quite easily switch their satellite dish over to 3ABN radio and use it to start broadcasting, either from a church premises or from a home. So basically my focus is on what happens when a church has a license on its building, a church-owned property, and what they can do with that. And in a way, I suppose it's something that has to be negotiated among the church members, firstly, and then between the church members as a whole and the owner of the license, which in this case would be the Australian Union Conference. So what has the Union and Faith FM told you about what you can do with the licenses they've helped you get recently?
How do you mean?
Have they, okay. I'm thinking in terms of, have they encouraged you to do local programming already? Or is it?
They have encouraged us to supply them with something local.
Right.
That they could then broadcast from, because in Manjimup, we have Manjimup specific advertising on Faith FM.
I do. Right. I think I've heard it actually.
Because we have the food pantry and stuff.
It may not be Manjimup only. It may be a WA specific deployment of that ad, so that Manjimup gets it, but I would get it too. I'm not sure how much tailoring Faith FM are doing at the moment, because I hear ads for Pathfinders at Grafton on my station. And so I don't know if they're kind of splitting it up that well, if you want to use that word. But it sounds to me that Faith FM have said, if you make programs from whatever you record in your church or your church activities, you can send those programs to us with a degree of editing or none at all, and we may put them on the radio. And I think the operating word is may. They may not. It would still be up to them to decide if they thought the content you provided was good enough. They'd probably critique it, and in whatever, starting with technical critique and then moving on to, thought content, and then they would then decide if they could work with you and get a better product in the next edition or whatever. So that they still have the right as a broadcaster to decline any content that was sent to them. I've sent content to them, not a lot. I'm a pretty busy guy organising my stations, so I don't do a lot of recording. But during the lockdown here, I did do some, and I haven't heard it on. It was just very basic stuff, announcements and things like that. And I haven't heard any of those announcements on my own station as yet. That could be a problem with my own installation. I've also upgraded to NBN recently. I don't know why I haven't heard it, but I'll look into that myself. The one thing with satellite is that you can be sure that you're going to get whatever's carried on the satellite signal. And it's a one size fits all across the country at the moment, because there's only one channel for 3ABN, and their programming guide is sitting on top of on their website. So you can download it as a PDF, and there it is in front of you, all timed out, titles, the whole bit. The Faith FM program guide is all online. You have to use either their app or the website details to track what programs are airing in your area. I have found it a bit difficult to use. I don't know if you've tried to use it, Ross.
Yeah, I have. It's not too bad.
It's not too bad.
Yeah, I've been able to do it from my mobile. At numerous different times, I've had people come and say to me that they heard something on Faith FM, but they wanted to know who the speaker was and could I find out, and I was able to look it up fairly quickly. Okay.
Yeah. Again, I may have had issues lately with my own internet connection. So what I see on the app program EPG, it's electronic program guide basically, may not be what's coming off my station, and that's something I don't like, because I really need to know that what is airing on my station is what should be airing on my station at a certain time on a certain day. But what else can we do apart from provide recorded content and send it to Faith FM and hope that they use it? 3ABN would probably do that too, by the way. And they would want a continuity, at least a series. So if you had a series in mind and it ran for 6 weeks or maybe 12 weeks or whatever, they'd get 12 programs out of you, and that might be all you were prepared to do. And they could use those for a period of time and then reuse them again a year later or something like that. I don't know how they do their programming, but that wouldn't be unusual. And it would probably air 2 or 3 times a day. That wouldn't be unusual either, on a day that it was scheduled to air. But the other thing that you can do is actually just when you're broadcasting from your church, you can break from the Faith FM program manually, so that what would normally go to air doesn't go to air, and you take over the transmitter at that point in time. And whatever you do live, or you could record it and then play it, that would then go out over your airwaves. But what I'm proposing, what the main thrust of my meeting here today is, that churches interrupt the normal flow of Faith FM or 3ABN programming at their church and put the church program live to air. Now, of course, that requires a little planning from the church's part and a little creativity. And you'd have to check with 3ABN, but you might even have to pay a little bit of money to cover your copyright on any music you wanted to use during that program. And you'd also have to be quite tight in how long it lasted.
Yeah.
So it would require a tightening up of the church service at the beginning and at the end and all the way through it, basically. But certainly the transitions into and out of the 1 hour program would need to be quite tight, because you don't want to interrupt too much of the main flow of Faith FM. It's not a crime. You can interrupt it for 6 hours, but whatever you interrupted it for, you'd have to end it when you said you were going to end it. And you'd probably want to start it when you decided you were going to start it, because radio requires a bit of, with listeners, requires a sense of continuity. And if you do interrupt, you should probably tell them you're going to interrupt before you do it. But if you have a routine of interruption, then they'll get used to that. And so it's a commitment that you have to keep, at least for as long as you say you're going to keep it. So if you say, I'm going to interrupt the programming of Faith FM from 11 a.m. on a Saturday morning for 2 hours, and you fill that whole 2 hours up for the next 3 months, then that would be what you'd do. And then you'd stop after 3 months and you'd work out something else, and then down the track, you'd start again. So you could commit to a whole 50 weeks, if you like. It's up to you. But the psychology of programming would require that for any interruption, it become a routine that people can get used to. And either they can tune in and enjoy it, or they can tune out and go somewhere else. You would hope they'd stay, obviously. You don't want to turn listeners off. But the thing is, if you're doing local programming, the odds are you will actually, and it's Manjimup centric, or Boyup book centric, if that's possible, or Kojonup centric. You really focus it in on the local events and the local atmosphere of the town and what the church is doing there, then people will actually be more drawn into it, I think, because they really want to have a local connection. And that's why it's so vital at this point with COVID-19, separating everybody out, atomizing society for a period of time to retain some sort of connection, and the church retaining a connection and maybe even building a stronger one with the wider community, including the membership that are within range. And you may also appreciate, Ross, that a lot of members of your church don't live within range of Manjimup Station, and it probably annoys them a bit. What do you think? They're probably begging for an increase in power in the radio so they can hear it, or something along those lines. Of course, the license wouldn't allow that. So that is a fundamental limit. The technology and the allocation that the license provides is simply to have a certain range. And if you're outside that range, then you don't get the signal. You can add another license further out if you like on the same frequency. That's an option to extend the reach. I have 5 licenses in Perth. On the south side of Perth, they're all 87.6s, and there's nothing else in between them except space. So I can cover the whole of the South Metro area, in theory, with one frequency. It's not cheap to do that. It'll be cheaper to have one station powerful enough to cover the whole area. That's more efficient. But I can technically cover everything south of the Leach Highway, basically, and down towards Rockingham. I can't do Rockingham, but I can do Mundajong and up into the hills and so on. So the question then is, would the church want to commit itself to interrupting and producing local content on a weekly basis for the purposes of outreach and connection with the community? And do you have the technology to make that possible? Can you answer that question now, Ross, in any particular way? I'll provide an answer.
I can let you know that to do it weekly would be a massive challenge, because I'm not here every week, obviously, with 4 churches.
Yes.
It would also mean we would need to negotiate with whoever it was that was preaching to agree to have their sermon broadcast outside the church. Some of our guest speakers, I can already hear them saying, no, I don't want that to happen.
Yep.
Because, just for a number of different reasons. I mean, there may be the option to record a sermon that I'm doing out at Katanning and then bring it back and then play it in a week that I'm not actually here. In terms of our technology, I really doubt that we have. I mean, I've only been here for 18 months, but I can already tell you that the tech in the actual church is
we're talking about.
Yeah, in Manji. Well, and Manji's got the best tech out of all. Well, yeah, probably the best tech out. Well, if we are going to, you said physically break into the broadcast.
Correct.
So there's
no other way of doing it that I can.
No, I understand that. I was just thinking about logistics. So the transmitter would need to be somewhere fairly close to the church.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that counts out Kojonup because it's at least 40k to the nearest church.
Yeah. No, that's not going to work.
So it's not possible.
This plan that I'm putting forward is directed at churches that have stations on their premises. And in Western Australia, we have more than just about any other conference in that position.
Which is a great thing.
Yeah, very few churches in Victoria. I know there's a few can boast a station on their premises. In Adelaide, it would be possible to move around the Faith FM licenses, and they would then operate from churches, at least half a dozen. But Faith FM haven't seen fit to do anything about that at this point. I don't know what their thinking is. I would do it straight away. But we in WA, we do have, because the situation 6 years ago was that there was an exclusion zone against this type of license in the southwest of Western Australia due to the presence of a Channel 3 TV station. Channel 3 TV stations operate down in the lower part of the FM band. They're all gone now. So all of those overlaps have disappeared since 2014. And in 2014, there was a big push to get new licenses in the southwest of Western Australia. Bunbury Channel 3 was dissolved as an analogue station, went all digital. And the church managed to pick up 6 or 7 radio stations, most of them on church premises. So the idea is that this is easier, it's really only possible to do if you have equipment set up to form a kind of studio come media center at the church that can be tapped into your transmitter and then broadcast live, or, you have a pre-recorded program that you play manually at a set time to go to air and then come back. You switch it back to Faith FM. I've been doing that every week on a Saturday morning for the last 3 months here at my home. The conference have been putting their Worship Together live program, and I found it to be quite good for broadcasting. Just the audio, of course, in my case. I watch the YouTube feed. It's on my computer or on my tablet, and I just source the audio into my transmitter mixer, and that's fine. There have been some dropouts because of problems. There have been some problems at the Welsh Pool end that were a bit unfortunate. But on the whole, the early programs were a bit iffy in visual presentation as well as audio, but they've got better. And I've been quite happy to do that for the last 3 months. And I can't really tell you how good the listenership has been in receiving that, because getting feedback from the community is a challenge with these radio licenses. People don't often convey much about how they're happy with something or not happy. If they're not happy, they'll generally just turn off. If they are happy, they often just enjoy it, on their radio. In Perth, it's a bit of a challenge because there are so many other medias to listen to. But out in Manjimup, there's not. In Kojonup, there's not. Or maybe Kojonup isn't a perfect choice, but Boyup Brook is a very small church. I think you well know that they would have even less technical capacity there to do anything like this than Manjimup does.
Oh, yeah. So
they might just say
Manjimup would be the only one. Manji would be the only one that would even come close.
Of the 4 of you. Precisely. I can understand that. I concede it. It's a sad thing, but it's just a reality. There's a very small church. Boddington's another one that I've been working on. They have the possibility of a very well located license. It's already a license. Faith of them have the license there already, but the guys there just I don't know what to do with it. I've tried to give them some help, but so the key thing is technically joining your PA mixer output to the transmitter. If the transmitter is located in the premises, then a physical cable to the transmitter and a switch of some sort between the Faith FM input to the mixer input is all you need to make that switch quite simple mechanical switch effectively. And it has to be done at the right time when you're interrupting the program, and then you switch it back at the right time when the program is over. It's not nice to interrupt a program once it's building ahead of steam.
Yeah.
So in a typical church setting, you'd want to start your program at 11 o'clock rather than 10 to 11, if that was the way it worked out. You can do it at 10 to 11. It's not a problem, but it requires a little extra thought process to do that. So that logistics aside, the key thing is you have your mixer, you have spare outputs that can go to a switch of some sort where the transmitter is. You switch from Faith FM, the Faith FM box feeds into the switch, one terminal, the mixer output feeds into another terminal, and you just switch between the two at the time you want to. That's it. You could do this with a computer, but it would require a whole computer to do it in an automated sense. So I think of Manjimup, where is the transmitter located in comparison to the rest of the equipment there?
At the other end of the building.
And that seems to be quite commonly the case. Was that a decision that the church made, or did Faith FM advise that, or was it a sort of a bit?
I'm not sure, I wasn't here at the time, but I would imagine it was a decision made simply because of the space available and the convenience of having it in a secure location rather than in the main body of the church. Our AV desk, etc., in the main body of the church is not a permanent fixture as such. It's not a built-in box. Right. And in fact, over the next month or so, it will be being moved along with all our audio and lighting equipment because we are changing the direction that the church is facing.
Oh, I see.
Inside. Of course, we're not shifting I'd like to actually pick the building up and turn it around, but you can't do that. It's a bit harder than just shifting some furniture. Yeah. So yeah, all of that is going to be moved, which is not going to bring the AV desk any closer to the transmitter.
Okay, all right.
In fact, if anything, it will take it further away.
Okay, all right. Well, I mean, the distance that a cable has to run is a factor in the strength of a signal at the other end. So
okay.
you would.
So what's the max distance, or what's the min distance needed?
But the main important thing, the key thing, is the transmitter, the distance from the transmitter to the tip of the antenna. Now, the shorter that distance is, the better. Okay, I'm just got a bit more space here. Good. So that's all fixed, and I wouldn't want to change that. Of course, if we did move the transmitter, then the cable to the antenna would have to get larger, and that would mean some drop-off in, minor drop-off, but it would mean some drop-off in power output, which is what nobody wants. You can obviously compensate for that. You simply increase the power output at the transmitter, and that will boost the signal. So keeping a short distance between of cable between the transmitter and antenna is a good idea. Running cable from a mixer into the transmitter over 20 meters is not a problem. More than that starts to become a bit iffy, but a typical RCA cable or a better XLR cable would handle 20 meters without any problem, and that would be fine. Of course, the Faith FM box is only a meter away from the transmitter. You know what I mean by the Faith FM box, don't you?
Yes, yeah.
It's just a little hand-sized, palm-sized silver unit. Yeah. Is your church running on internet, actually in the church building, or is the Faith FM transmitter using its own mobile source?
Its own mobile source.
Ah, right, okay. That's actually probably better. Okay, so...
That's right, isn't it? Yeah.
So what do you think? We can exclude Boyup Kojonup is 40 k's from the nearest church, so they could perhaps build a little studio if they wanted to there, but I don't think it's a place where there are regular programs taking place. It's a home, is that right? Kojonup's a home?
Car jump is a building premises, a business premises.
A business premises. So it's not something you can use in this fashion, presumably.
Yeah.
You couldn't go there and run a live program of any sort.
No. Not without getting your hair done at the same time.
Oh well, that's wonderful still, but it's like me running a show from a fish and chip shop. You can't do it like that. So homes you might be able to manage, but by and large, no. This is for churches at their premises. Van Jam Up is clearly the first kid on the block for having a go. So it really depends on what you think can be done. The easiest thing to do is what Faith FM have already suggested. That is, you record programs and send them to them. Record sermons, basically. Be as innovative as you like. Have panel discussion sermons. Anything you can do that's a little different to a typical pulpit sermon. Not that they're wrong. I'm fine with them too. It really is more about content, but style of presentation makes a little difference too. So they will be looking for innovation, and if they like something, they'll use it. And if you commit to producing it regularly, monthly might be all you can manage. I think Armidale could do weekly. Bigger church, more tech. They've got a digital mixer. They've got an internet connection to the church in the last few months. So I think they could probably, and they want to go live streaming on the net. Now, I'll ask you this question. I might leave you with that, a few thoughts with that as well. If you're planning at all to do video live stream or a YouTube stream or a Facebook stream, whatever, or maybe a group Zoom or something from the church in the future, you could take the audio from that and feed it into the transmitter. So you can kill two birds with one stone. You're doing a webcast as well as a FM cast, a simulcast. That's what I've been calling it. I don't know whether that's on your agenda for the near future.
Well, we are doing, we're going live to our Facebook page every Sabbath now.
Right. Well, if you're doing that, and if your speakers are comfortable with you doing that, it's just broadcasting. You realise that, don't you?
Well, at the moment, it's just been me that's been doing it, and one of our elders.
You've signed up for that, and the other elders fine with it. You're thinking of future guest visitors. How can you navigate that sort of thing with them? It's something you'd have to approach them about. They may not be comfortable with it.
That's right.
And you can't force them. I wouldn't even dream saying, well, you come here and you do this or you don't come. No one's going to do that. That's just rude.
No.
You're not going to do that. We want people to have a chance to preach, and if they have to be comfortable to do that. It's a ministry of the word, and that's what's most important. But so therefore, a weekly one mightn't work for live, but a bi-weekly or a monthly one at the minimum might work. Any amount, anytime you go to Facebook stream webcast, you can potentially do an FM simulcast. And that basically is the end of my conversation. If that's where you're at, then you can do it. It may be a matter of the technology of getting the audio from the mixer or even from the computer, if we're at that level, to the transmitter and manually switching it across to local control. So the church, the PA system, everything that it is then controlling what goes out the transmitter. That's what you have to do. And if you're being cautious about what goes on the web, the same level of caution is required for what goes on FM. It's not all guns blazing Adventism. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
There's a little pullback, and I don't think you need to compromise on our core message. Our core message is probably all about Jesus. But there's a bit more in the prophetic side. That still goes, but if you're conscious of a wider audience that you don't want to unduly offend, then that is right. That is 100% necessary. And if you're webcasting, you've already worked that out, in my view. So you don't have a problem with tempering the content for a wider audience. The importance I see of this suggestion, and it's only that at this stage, is that you're widening your connection field with the wider community, because you will find that there are people, and your members probably have heard that there are people out there in the community listening who are not church members. The members are getting feedback.
We know that there are people out there listening to Faith FM because they come and tell us that's how they found out about the food pantry.
Boom. And okay, well, there you go. So that's the advertisement that you promote. And you can keep promoting that in the middle of your webcast and everything else, because that's fundamental to the identity of the church. It's a food pantry ministry driven church, and it's also a media ministry church with the radio, with the webcast. Churches, I'm hoping, can begin to see themselves with this radio asset as a media center church. If they're not already there through the web, then they can certainly get there through FM. Best to have both things happening at the same time. It just kills two birds with one stone. The only thing that the radio needs is the audio from your webcast. Exactly what I'm doing when I'm simulcasting the conference programming.
Okay.
Just taking their audio feed and putting it on my station. I have, when there's a break, if there's a fault, and I'm actually stage managing it from my studio here at home, I will jump in and say, there's a bit of a problem here. Let's go to a song, and I'll come back. So I am DJing as well.
Okay.
But if you're doing a webcast from Mansion, you're already doing that. You'd have to be. You'd have to be ready to respond to an unexpected situation as quickly as you can. Otherwise, the cast is gone. All right? People will take a bit of downtime. People are quite tolerant, but there is a limit. They will go if they don't think it's coming back. I'm off. See ya, and then you've lost them.
Yeah.
So if you're webcasting, you know that. That's it. I'm not going to spruik for Ultronics where I work, but we do sell mechanical switches, or we have in the past. So it depends what sort of an output your mixer has, if there's any spare outputs. You may have to get a distributor of some sort. That's what a switch does, actually. It distributes... no, that's not right. A distributor will take a single output and split it in two ways. So, for instance, say you've got a smaller mixer at your PA desk, and it has just one output, probably to drive speakers. Mostly that'd be what they drive, a stereo output, or drive an amplifier to drive the speakers, shall we say. You may have to get a splitter, so you get two equally leveled outputs, and one would then go off to the transmitter side, where there'd be another switcher that would take between the Faith FM output or the mixer output. So I don't know what you've got, technically speaking, but if your technician's there, he will be either nodding or shaking his head, whatever. That's as to what's possible. Somehow the audio from your mixer, if it's going to a computer, is he want to say something?
It's the audio. How many outputs have we got? Just the two for the speakers? No? We got more than two.
But they're used for other things at the moment.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So we have multiple outputs from the mixing desk.
Yeah.
In terms of going to...
They're all used up, and that's another matter. But if they're not all used up, then you'll be okay.
Yeah. Like I said, it's all being moved in the not too distant future, so we can talk to the guy that's coming across from Bustleton, Bunbury, who installed this stuff.
Nothing will install it.
Okay. Well, he has had stuff to do with this, with our setup before.
Right.
We could certainly talk to him about it.
Coming from Bunbury, what's his name?
So basically what you're saying is we need from our mixing desk an output of some description, be that a splitter or a direct,
Yeah.
and a cable to go straight to a switch at the transmitter.
Correct. Yep.
And it's a manual switch at the transmitter.
That's it. That's all I'm proposing. I'm not going into there are automatic switches you could buy, but it's not necessary. Yeah. The minimum you're doing now is the minimum you would want to do for a live broadcast, which is about an hour. You know, you're doing it on the web for an hour. You can go longer, go to 2 hours if you want, but you know, it's more work. And churches have limits. You know, they're volunteers, except yourself and maybe one other person. There is a limit on what can be done logistically, but you can have, as long as you want. If your young people are really keen, and I don't know whether they are, they could have a whole afternoon to themselves. The thing I'm trying to communicate is that a license that is operating from your premises was bought by the church.
Yeah.
You may know that, or because you've only been there for a while, but go back 4 or 5 years when I mentioned how all this stuff opened up. The AUC approached churches. The conference didn't have much to do with it at all. They stood back from this, but the AUC approached churches, Faith FM I'm talking about, and they said, we can get licenses for you. Give us money. You know, they really didn't put the money up to get a license from the conference, from the union. The local church did. So the church really should feel that they own the license, even though legally they don't.
Okay, your signal is frozen.
Yeah, it's come back. Is it better now?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that. Even though legally the AUC, Faith FM, own the license, and they do have, the buck stops with them as the owner when it comes to regulatory issues. In a moral sense, it's the local church that owns the license because they paid for it. They funded it. They paid for the equipment. None of this was donated by the union. It's all the church's equipment. So you can do, in a negotiated sense, just about anything you want to do on that license. And Faith FM could object, but they're not likely to, because you're all on the same page, let's face it. The church exists for the purpose of building up the Church of God. And AUC exists for the same reason. So it really isn't likely to be a problem. You could do a whole weekend of programming live. Just forget about Faith FM for the weekend if you wanted to take over it. I'm not suggesting you do that. That's a tremendous amount of work and planning. And you're probably going to do it once a year, seriously. But on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, or whenever you do a webcast, then FM can go along with it. And if we have a lockdown situation again, you can potentially say, well, look, we're a radio station. We need to have a skeleton crew here every week broadcasting. You can tell the authorities that, and they can keep you open for that purpose. Because in the outset of COVID-19, the churches just died. It was just gone. Of course, they didn't die, but until they could rally their other resources together. When did Zoom meetings start for you? After, I mean, we actually were a week ahead, I think, of the government announcing the closure of churches. When did you start Zoom meetings? Presumably you've been doing that down there.
Yeah. Well, Facebook Live started immediately.
Right. But you've been doing that already.
And the Zoom prayer meeting started immediately. And then Zoom Sabbath School started probably 2 weeks after.
Gotcha. So you actually did pretty well, I think. I think most churches were probably a week or two before they could get it all happening at least once. Yeah. And then it started to roll into a smoother routine. So, but imagine what you could have done if there was permission for a skeleton crew to operate something from the premises of the church. And unless you establish a routine of doing that, and maybe register it with the local authorities, if this thing happens again, it'll be the same thing all over again. I believe churches want to connect with each other. The membership wants to connect with each other in some way, and maintain or even extend a connection with the wider community. Radio is a very powerful connector. A lot of people are not that fond of the internet. I'm sure your Zoom meetings would have indicated that not a lot of people were really keen on that. I've done a few, but not everybody will do it. They just didn't care, didn't like it, didn't want to do it. But they might listen to the radio. They might listen to YouTube too. if it's not some foreign stream, like foreign from Melbourne or something like that, but it's local, they're more inclined to tune in.